Hello, chemistry students. This is your video for day 8, April 8th, 2020. The last video gave you a brief introduction on how we actually encounter frequency, this idea of, of something happening in our daily lives. Well, this video is going to give you a brief explanation of what frequency actually is. When you hear the word frequent or frequency, you typically think of something happening and maybe how many times something happens or how quickly something happens. For example, I move my hands frequently, which means I move my hands a lot. Well, frequency is essentially how often something is happening. But for physics and for waves, frequency is how often waves occur in a unit time, or how many wave cycles happens per unit time. Wave cycles is just simply how many waves do you have. On the picture that you see, you have roughly 1, 2, maybe 2 and 2.3, 2.75 waves there. And on my pointer here, you have 1, 2, 3, almost 4 waves there. So if I look at the number of waves happening here versus the number of waves happening there, well, there are more waves here. A wave cycle is essentially how many waves. So there's like 1, 2, nearly 3, or nearly 4 waves there. That's my wave cycles. But how many waves are happening per unit time? Well, frequency is how many waves happen per unit time, and it's a measurement that we have. And we even give it its own little special symbol, the Greek letter nu. So you've been taught alpha, beta, gamma, delta, mu, even omega. Well, the symbol, and lambda for wavelength. Well, now you know the Greek letter nu, which that looks like a V, but in fact is not a V. It is a V on one side, but curvy. It's a round V on the right side. So that's the Greek letter nu, and we'll practice drawing that. But frequency is represented by that specific Greek letter, just like wavelength is represented by lambda. Well, frequency is a measurement, and most measurements have a special unit that goes with it to tell you that you're measuring that quantity. And for frequency, it is the hertz, Hz, big H, little z. And a hertz stands for how many waves are happening or how many cycles is happening per second. So, for example, me clapping my hands. I'm clapping my hands at a certain rate, so many times per second. 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Well, if you were counting along, that was 2 claps per second. So one clap would be considered one cycle, 1,000. Well, that was 2 claps, so that's 2 cycles. And that happened in the span of 1 second. So my frequency was 1,000, 2 hertz, 2 hertz, 2 slaps per second, 2 slaps per second. Now, if I want to increase my frequency, I increase the number of slaps I do. 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, 4, 1,000, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. If this is happening every second, that means I have a frequency of 4. I think I do. I kind of got off on that. But how many things happen per second is a frequency, and that unit is the hertz, big H, little z. And there is actual a relationship between waves, and specifically the length of a wave and the frequency. If you look here, let's assume that this is how many waves occurred in 1 second versus the number of waves that happened up here in 1 second. So from here to here is the span of 1 second. From here to here is the span of 1 second. Well, which one has more waves, the top one or the bottom? Well, the bottom one has more waves occurring in that 1 second. And if you look at the wavelength of these waves, well, you see there's a smaller wavelength here versus this one, which has a longer wavelength. You can measure the wavelength from the top of this crest to the top of the next crest. That's one wave. Well, you have fewer waves happening. You have longer wavelengths, which is going to give us a lower frequency. That would be me doing this. But if you have a smaller wavelength or a shorter wavelength, you're going to have a higher frequency. More waves are happening in this span of time than on top. So this is a higher frequency and this is a lower frequency, and it's related to the length of each wave. So here I have roughly 3 waves. Here I have roughly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's roughly 6.5, 7 waves. So more waves happening here, higher frequency. Fewer waves happening here, lower frequency. All right, that's today's lesson. There will be an assignment for this. Make sure that you answer all the questions on the assignment for the entire week before you turn your assignment in. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.